Captain Doyen stared at the screen in his small ship cabin. The message played again, and each time it made his stomach tight. 17 different alien languages, all saying the same words. Help us, please help us. We are dying. His ship, the Steadfast Dawn, was just a cargo hauler. He carried medicine and supplies to human colonies on the far edge of known space. Nothing special. Nothing important. But somehow his communication system had picked up this desperate call from across the galaxy. Doyun leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He was 43 years old, and he had seen enough of the galaxy to know how it worked. The big alien species, the ones who ran the Galactic Council, they did not care about problems unless those problems affected them directly, and they definitely did not care about humans. Earth had joined the Council 73 years ago. Humanity thought it would be wonderful, meeting other intelligent species, sharing knowledge, becoming part of something bigger. But the aliens took one look at Earth and called it a death world. Too much gravity, too many diseases, predators everywhere, storms that could destroy cities. The aliens said humans were dangerous because Earth had made them too strong, too aggressive, too hard to kill. So humanity stayed on the edges, the unwanted neighbors, the scary cousins nobody invited to family gatherings. Doyen opened his eyes and played the message one more time. The coordinates pointed to a planet called Calros III. He had heard of it. 12 billion people lived there. Peaceful people. They had never hurt anyone. He made his decision. Doyen changed course and headed for the nearest jump gate. If nobody else would listen to this call for help, at least he could tell someone who might care. 3 days later, Ambassador Heejin stood in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council on Varanus Prime. The chamber was beautiful, made of crystal that caught light and turned it into rainbows. Hundreds of alien species filled the seats, some sitting, some floating, some existing in ways that human eyes could barely understand. Yijin had been humanity's ambassador for 10 years. She had argued for better trade deals, for fair treatment, for respect. She had won some small victories, but mostly she had learned patience. The council moved slowly. They talked endlessly. They avoided hard decisions whenever possible. Today was different. Today, she had forced an emergency session. The distress call from Calros III has been broadcasting for 6 days, Heejin said, her voice steady and clear. 12 billion Calrosians are under attack. They are asking for help. We must respond. A Trellix counselor clicked its mandibles together, the sound echoing through the chamber. The Trellix looked like giant insects with hard shells and multiple legs. We have reviewed the situation, Ambassador Heejin. The enemy is too dangerous. They call themselves the Devourers, and they have destroyed 7 civilizations in the past century. We cannot risk our forces against them. Then what do you suggest? Heejin asked. She already knew the answer. She had seen it in their eyes, in their body language, in the way they all avoided looking at the screen showing Calros III burning. A Lumini counselor spoke next, its gaseous form shimmering with colors. We will establish a quarantine zone. We will make sure the Devourers do not spread beyond the Calros system. This is the logical choice. We save the many by sacrificing the few. 12 billion is not a few, Heejin said quietly. Compared to the trillions in the galaxy, it is acceptable loss, the Trellix replied. Heejin looked around the chamber. She saw the same expression on every face, every form, every being. Fear. They were all afraid, and because they were afraid, they would do nothing. Show me the live feed from Calros III, Heejin demanded. Ambassador, that is not necessary. Show me. The main screen flickered to life. The image showed a city on fire. Buildings collapsed. Streets filled with running people, their four-eyed faces twisted in terror. The Calrosians looked fragile, delicate, with thin limbs and soft skin. They had evolved on a paradise world with no predators, no harsh weather, no reasons to become strong. A young Calrosian child appeared on screen, looking directly at the camera. Her 4 eyes were wide and wet with tears. She said something in her language. The translator provided the words, "Is anyone coming? Please, is anyone coming to help us?" Then the feed went dark. The council chamber was silent. Heejin looked around and saw that most of the counselors had looked away when the child appeared. They did not want to see. They did not want to feel responsible. You are all cowards, Heejin said. The translator carried her words to every species in their own language. Several counselors gasped. Insults were not common in council chambers. You hide behind your logic and your acceptable losses, but the truth is simple. You are afraid, and you are abandoning 12 billion people to die because saving them would be hard. The Trellix counselor stood, all 6 legs clicking against the crystal floor. Ambassador Hyejin, you forget yourself. The council has made its decision. The quarantine zone will be established. No ships are to enter the Kalros system. This includes human ships. Do you understand? Hyejin understood perfectly. She bowed her head, a gesture of respect that fooled no one who knew her well. I understand, counselor. Will that be all? You are dismissed. Hyejin walked out of the chamber with her head high and her hand steady. But inside she was already planning. She had a secure communication device in her quarters. It could send encrypted messages directly to Earth, bypassing all council monitoring. That night, while the council members went to sleep believing the problem was solved, Hyejin sat at her desk and composed a simple message. This is Ambassador Hyejin. 12 billion Calrosians are dying on Kalros III. The enemy is called the Devourers. The council has refused to help and has forbidden any intervention. The Calrosians are peaceful people who have never hurt anyone. They have children. They have families. They are people just like us. They asked if anyone was coming to help them. The galaxy said no. What does humanity say? She attached all the data she had, coordinates, information about the Devourers, the little bit of tactical analysis available, and the video of the child asking if anyone was coming. Then she pressed send. 6 hours later, the response came back. It was short, only 3 words, but those 3 words made Hyejin smile for the first time in days. We are coming. On Earth, in Geneva, in the military command center, General Minje stood before a holographic display showing the Kalros system. Around him, officers moved quickly, pulling up ship manifests, calculating jump routes, assembling forces. 12 warships, Minje said. 4,000 Marines. Everything we can spare without leaving Earth defenseless. How fast can they be ready? 18 hours, sir, an officer replied. Make it 12. A captain standing nearby cleared her throat. General, the council has forbidden this. If we intervene, we could be expelled from the council entirely. We could face sanctions, even military action against us. General Minje looked at her. He was 70 years old, and his face showed every one of those years in scars and lines. He had fought in the corporate wars before first contact. He had seen humanity at its worst and its best. Captain, do you know why the aliens call Earth a death world? He asked. Because it is hostile, sir. Dangerous, it made us hard to kill. That is part of it, Minje agreed. But there is another reason. Earth taught us something that paradise worlds never teach. It taught us that life is precious because it is fragile. It taught us to protect each other because if we do not, nobody else will. The galaxy has forgotten this lesson if they ever knew it at all. So yes, we will face consequences. But we will face them knowing we did the right thing. He turned back to the display. Get those ships ready. And send word to the Marines. Tell them they are going to save 12 billion people, who the rest of the galaxy has already given up on. Tell them they are going to show everyone what humans are really made of. The officer saluted. Yes, sir. Within hours, across Earth and human colonies, Marines gathered their gear. Ships fueled and armed, families said goodbyes, and everyone understood that this might be a one-way trip. The council was powerful. The Devourers were deadly. But none of that mattered. Somewhere in the dark, people were calling for help. And humanity had decided to answer. The human fleet traveled through 6 jump gates to reach the Kalros system. Each jump took them farther from Earth, farther from safety, deeper into a part of the galaxy where humans were not welcome. Commander Jiho stood on the bridge of the lead warship, the Indomitable, watching the stars stretch and bend as they moved through jump space. Jiho was 38 years old and had spent 20 of those years in the military. He was calm under pressure, smart about tactics, and absolutely certain about one thing. Leaving people to die was never acceptable. When the call had come asking for volunteers for this mission, every single Marine under his command had stepped forward. Not because they were suicidal, not because they were glory seekers, but because it was the right thing to do. Commander, we are picking up ships ahead, the sensor officer called out. Multiple vessels, various species, all heading away from Kalros III. Put them on screen, Jiho ordered. The main display showed dozens of ships, some large, some small, all fleeing the system as fast as their engines would carry them. Jiho recognized the designs. Trellix cargo haulers, Luminae science vessels, deep-borne transport barges, all the so-called civilized species running away. Open a channel to the nearest ship, Jiho said. A moment later, a Trellix captain appeared on screen. The insect-like alien's mandibles clicked nervously. Human ship, you are heading the wrong direction. The Devourers have taken the system. Nothing can stop them. Turn back while you still can. How many refugees are you carrying? Jiho asked. The Trellix captain looked confused. We have our own crew. 15 individuals. Why do you ask? You left Calros 3 and did not pick up any Calrosians? There was no time. The Devourers were everywhere. We barely escaped with our lives. Jiho felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice level. I see. Safe travels, Captain. He cut the channel and looked at his crew. Scan all the fleeing ships. I want to know which ones have refugees and which ones abandoned people to save themselves. Over the next hour, the human fleet intercepted 6 ships that had picked up Calrosian refugees. These ships were overcrowded, barely functioning, pushed beyond their design limits. The human ships pulled alongside and began transferring refugees to their own cargo bays. It was cramped, uncomfortable, but safe. One Calrosian woman, her 4 eyes wide with shock, stared at the human Marines helping her aboard. You are going toward the danger, she said in broken English. Why? Private Somin, who was helping guide refugees to the cargo bay, smiled gently. Because someone has to, she said simply. Somin was 22 years old and this was her first real deployment. She had trained for 3 years, learned to fight, learned to survive, learned to be a Marine, but nothing had prepared her for the look in that Calrosian woman's eyes, the confusion that anyone would run toward danger instead of away from it. The fleet reached the edge of the Calros system 12 hours later. What they saw made even the most experienced soldiers pause. Space itself seemed to be alive. A massive wall of organic material stretched across thousands of kilometers, pulsing and writhing. Ships floated in the wall, half consumed, their metal hulls being slowly dissolved and absorbed. 2 of Calros the 3's 3 moons were gone, just empty space where they used to be. The Devourers had eaten them. What in the hell are we looking at? Someone whispered. Jiho studied the readings. The Devourers were not just a species. They were a biomechanical plague, something that consumed everything. Metal, organic matter, energy, and grew stronger with each thing they ate. They learned from what they consumed, adapting, evolving. Launch reconnaissance drones, Jiho ordered. I want to know where the main concentration of Devourers is on the planet's surface, and find me a way through that orbital swarm. The tactical officer shook her head. Commander, our models show a 97% chance of catastrophic losses if we attempt orbital insertion. These things will tear our drop pods apart. What about the other 3%? Jiho asked. That is margin of error, sir. Realistically, the chance is probably 100%. Jiho looked around the bridge at his crew. They all knew what he was about to say. They all knew it was crazy, and he could see in their faces that they were with him anyway. Prep all drop pods for immediate launch, Jiho said. We are going in. The drop pods launched from the fleet like metal rain. Each pod carried 4 Marines, packed in tight, strapped down, surrounded by ablative armor and thrust systems. The pods punched through the orbital swarm at maximum speed. The Devourers reacted immediately. Organic tendrils reached out, trying to snare the pods. Some succeeded. Pod after pod was grabbed, crushed, consumed. Somin, strapped into her pod with 3 other Marines, felt the whole thing shake as something scraped against the hull outside. Hold on, someone shouted, though there was nothing else they could do. The pod spun wildly. Through the small viewport, Somin caught glimpses of other pods exploding, of Devourers swarming through space, of Calros III growing larger below. Then they hit the atmosphere and everything became fire and noise. The pod crashed into what used to be a city. The impact drove the breath from Somin's lungs. For a moment she could not think, could not move. Then training took over. She hit the release and the pod door blew open. Outside was hell. The city was in ruins. Buildings had been torn apart, their materials half dissolved into the same organic mechanical substance that made up the Devourers. Bodies lay in the streets, both Calrosian and Devourer, and everywhere the enemy moved. The Devourers looked like nightmares made real. They had no standard form. Some walked on legs, some crawled, some flew. They were made of flesh and metal fused together in ways that made no sense. Eyes sprouted from random places. Teeth grew in spirals. They moved with purpose, searching, hunting, consuming. Form up. Corporal Junho shouted. He was the senior Marine in their pod. Weapons free. Shoot anything that moves and is not human. Salman brought up her rifle and started firing. The Devourers were fast, but humans were faster. Her training took over. Aim, fire, move, aim, fire, move. Other pods were landing nearby, and she could hear more humans calling out positions, laying down fire, fighting. The Devourers learned quickly. They adapted to the rifle fire, growing thicker armor, moving in more complex patterns. But they had never fought humans before. They had never encountered a species that refused to stop, that kept fighting even when injured, that worked together with such coordination. Junho pulled a grenade from his belt and threw it into a cluster of Devourers. Fire in the hole! The explosion scattered biomechanical pieces across the street. More Devourers came to investigate. More grenades followed. Humans fought with guns, explosives, fire, anything that worked. When Salman's rifle overheated, she switched to her sidearm. When that ran low on ammunition, she fixed her bayonet. Deep underground, in a bunker beneath the ruined city, a Calrosian named Tyvan listened to the sounds of battle above. Tyvan was an engineer, 41 years old, with a wife and 2 children who had died 3 days ago when the Devourers breached their shelter. He was waiting to die. They were all waiting to die. Then he heard something new. Explosions, gunfire, and voices shouting in a language he did not recognize. What is that? Someone asked in the darkness. Tyvan moved to the bunker's small viewport, a crack in the wall that looked out onto the street level. What he saw made no sense. Humans, actual humans. He had heard of them. The Deathworlders from the isolated planet on the galaxy's edge. He had seen pictures, but pictures did not capture the reality. They were fighting the Devourers hand to hand. One human, Tyvan would later learn his name was Doyun, the cargo captain who had first heard the distress call and had left his ship to fight, was dragging 3 wounded Calrosians toward the bunker entrance. Devourers swarmed around him. He was hit multiple times, weapons fire burning through his armor, yet he kept moving. Another human ran to help him. Together they got the Calrosians to the bunker door and pounded on it. Open up, Doyun shouted in English. We have wounded. Tyvan's hand shook as he opened the door. The 2 humans pushed the wounded Calrosians inside, then turned back to face the enemy. They did not retreat to safety. They went back out to fight. Why? Tyvan whispered. Why are you doing this? But the humans did not hear him. They were too busy saving people who the rest of the galaxy had already given up on. Above the planet in orbit, Commander Jiho watched the tactical displays. Half the drop pods had been destroyed on entry. 2,000 Marines had made it to the surface. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and somehow impossibly they were winning ground. All ships, Jiho said calmly, begin orbital bombardment of designated Devourer concentrations. Let us give our people some breathing room, and someone get me a line to that bunker network. I want to coordinate evacuation of civilians. The human warships opened fire. Energy beams and kinetic weapons rained down on the planet, carefully targeted to avoid human positions. The Devourers had consumed entire civilizations, had adapted to countless forms of warfare, had never been stopped. But they had never fought anyone from a death world before. The human forces fought for 72 hours without stopping. They carved out a defensive zone around the last functioning Calrosian city, a place called Nethos that held 3 million survivors. Salman could not remember the last time she had slept. Her body moved on training and stubbornness alone. We need to fortify this intersection, Corporal Junho said, pointing at a map display. His face was covered in dust and dried blood, none of it his own. If the Devourers break through here, they will have a straight path to the civilian shelters. Salman nodded and called her squad over. They had started with 12 people. Now there were 6. She did not let herself think about the others. There would be time to grieve later. Right now there was work to do. They set up barricades made from rubble and wrecked vehicles. They positioned automatic guns at key angles. They planted mines in patterns that would funnel the enemy into kill zones. And when that was done, they moved to the next position and did it all again. The Calrosians watched in amazement. Tyvan, the engineer, had left his bunker to help coordinate with the humans. He watched a group of Marines work and realized something profound. Humans did not stop. They did not need to stop. Their bodies were built for endurance in ways his people could not match. A Calrosian needed 8 hours of rest every day. Humans could go days without sleep if necessary. A Calrosian would die from injuries that humans treated as minor annoyances. A Calrosian could not survive in the temperature extremes, the toxic environments, the crushing gravity that humans considered normal. "How are you doing this?" Tevan asked Doyen, who was helping to position a heavy weapon despite having taken several hits in earlier fighting. Doyen's armor was cracked, his left arm was bandaged, and he moved with a limp. But he moved. Doyen looked at him and smiled tiredly. "Doing what?" "Continuing, fighting, not giving up. What else would we do?" Doyen asked simply. "People need help. We help them. That is how it works. But you are injured. You should be resting, recovering." Doyen shrugged. "I will rest when everyone is safe. Until then, there is work to do." On the human command ship in orbit, Dr. Yunji studied the data her team had collected from captured devourer specimens. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life, and what she was seeing both fascinated and horrified her. The devourers were not natural. They had been created, engineered by some long-dead civilization as a weapon, but they had evolved beyond their original programming. Now they existed only to consume, to grow, to spread. They learned from everything they ate, taking the best traits from each species they absorbed. But Yunji had found something interesting. She had tested devourer tissue against human blood samples, and the results were surprising. Human biology was toxic to them. Not immediately fatal, but enough to make them sick, to slow their adaptation process. "It makes sense," Yunji said to her assistant, a young woman named Minseo who handled communications. "The devourers have consumed species from paradise worlds. Peaceful species. Species that evolved without predators, without diseases, without constant environmental threats. But humans, we come from a world that tried to kill us every day. Our blood carries antibodies to diseases that do not even exist on other worlds. Our proteins are structured differently. We are poison to them. Can we use this?" Minseo asked. Yunji thought for a moment. "Maybe. If we can get samples to Commander Jiho, he might be able to develop some kind of biological weapon. But first we need to understand more about how the devourers coordinate. They are too organized. There has to be some kind of central intelligence directing them." Down on the planet, Commander Jiho was thinking the same thing. He stood in what used to be a Calrosian government building, now serving as human command headquarters. Around him, officers analyzed data, coordinated troop movements, and planned their next move. "The devourers are not attacking randomly," Jiho said, pointing at a holographic map of the continent. "Look at the pattern. They push hardest here and here and here. They are testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. That means something is coordinating them, something smart. Reconnaissance shows a massive structure in the northern continent," a tactical officer reported. "Energy readings are off the charts. It might be their command center, some kind of hive node." Jiho studied the data. The structure was 600 kilometers away, through territory completely controlled by the devourers. The military AI calculated their chances of reaching it at less than 1%. "We need to destroy that node," Jiho said calmly. Everyone in the room went silent. Finally, someone spoke up. "Commander, that is suicide. We barely have enough forces to hold the defensive line. If we split our troops for an offensive operation, we lose anyway," Jiho interrupted. "Every hour more devourers arrive. They are growing faster than we can kill them. They are learning our tactics. If we stay defensive, we will eventually be overwhelmed. Our only chance is to cut off their coordination. Take out the hive node and maybe the rest of them will fall apart." He looked around the room at his officers. "I need 1,000 volunteers for a march north. Tell them honestly what the odds are. Tell them this is likely a one-way trip. But tell them also that it might save 3 million Calrosians and give the rest of our forces a fighting chance." 2 hours later, Jiho had his volunteers. Every single Marine who could still walk had stepped forward. He had to turn people away. Somin made the cut, as did Junho. Doyun volunteered too, despite his injuries. They marched at dawn. 1,000 humans moving north through a devastated landscape, fighting toward what everyone knew was probably their deaths, but they sang as they marched, old military songs from Earth, cadences in a dozen languages. The sound echoed across the ruins. On Varani's Prime, in the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador He-Jin stood in chains. She was under arrest for violating the quarantine order, for ordering human ships into forbidden space, for defying the Council's authority. The trial had been going on for 2 days, but something had changed. Minseo, the communications officer from Dr. Yunji's ship, had managed to broadcast footage from Kalros III directly into the council chamber. The soft species of the galaxy were now watching what humans were doing. They saw Marines fighting against impossible odds. They saw Doyen dragging wounded Calrosians to safety while under fire. They saw Somin defending a bunker entrance for 6 hours straight, her rifle barrel glowing red from heat. They saw Junho joking with his squad to keep morale up even as they prepared to march toward certain death. And they saw what the Devourers were. The nightmare that the Council had been too afraid to face. A Lumini counselor, its gaseous form swirling with uncomfortable colors, spoke carefully. This footage is disturbing. The humans are fighting with remarkable courage, but this does not change the fact that Ambassador Hyagin violated direct orders. Because following orders meant letting 12 billion people die, Hyagin said quietly. Tell me, Counselor, how many people would you let die to avoid taking a risk? That is not the point. That is exactly the point, Hyagin interrupted. You call humans Deathworlders like it is an insult. You fear us because we are strong. Because we are hard to kill. Because Earth made us into survivors. But you know what else Earth made us? It made us people who understand that life is precious. That it is worth fighting for, worth dying for. You species from paradise worlds, you have forgotten this. You have become soft, not just in body but in spirit. The chamber erupted in angry clicks, whistles, and shouts. But Hyagin was not finished. My people are fighting on Kalros III right now. They are bleeding and dying for strangers, not for profit, not for territory, not for glory, but because it is right. And when they are done, if any of them survive, they will come home to face whatever punishment you decide to give them. Because that is what humans do. We do what is right and we accept the consequences. On Kalros III, the human column was halfway to the hive node. They had been fighting for 3 days straight. The Devourers attacked constantly, but the humans kept moving forward. They used flamethrowers to burn through organic barriers. They used explosives to collapse Devourer tunnels. They fought with rifles, pistols, knives, and when those ran out, with rocks and fists. Salmon's squad was down to 3 people. Hunyo was still alive, still cracking jokes even though everyone knew he was terrified. A Marine named Hyun had joined them after her original squad was wiped out. They walked together, fought together, survived together. At night, when they had a few hours to rest, Salmon recorded a message on her personal comm device. She did not know if anyone would ever hear it, but she needed to say the words anyway. Mom, Dad, if you are watching this, I am okay. Well, not really okay. This is the hardest thing I have ever done. I am scared. I am tired. Half my friends are dead. But I want you to know that I would not change anything. We are doing something important here. We are showing the galaxy that humanity is more than just survivors from a death world. We are protectors. We are the people who run toward danger when everyone else runs away. I am proud to be human. I am proud to be a Marine. And I am proud of what we are doing here. I love you both. She stopped recording and looked up at the alien sky. 400 kilometers to go. Somewhere ahead was the hive node, the heart of the Devourer presence on this world. The hive node rose from the ruined landscape like a twisted mountain. It was massive, kilometers tall, made from metal and flesh fused together in patterns that hurt to look at. Energy crackled across its surface. The air around it shimmered with heat and radiation. This was the heart of the Devourer presence on Kalros III. The intelligence that coordinated billions of individual units across the planet. Commander Jiho stood at the edge of the valley, looking at their target. Behind him were 347 humans. They had started with 1,000. The march north had cost them more than half their force, but the ones who remained were the toughest, the most stubborn, the ones who simply refused to die no matter what the universe threw at them. That is it, Jiho said quietly. Everything we have done, everything we have sacrificed, it comes down to this. We destroy that thing and maybe we give the Calrosians a chance. We fail and this world dies. Questions? Summon raised her hand. She looked terrible. Everyone did. 3 days of constant fighting had left them all exhausted, injured, running on willpower alone. What is the plan, sir? Simple, Jiho said. We go in loud and hard. The Devourers will defend the hive node with everything they have. We fight through them, plant our charges at the base of the structure and bring the whole thing down. Timing is critical. Everyone sets their charges for simultaneous detonation. We will have maybe 30 minutes to get clear before everything explodes. And if we cannot get clear in time? Someone asked. Jiho met their eyes steadily. Then we make sure the charges go off anyway. The mission is more important than any of us. The Calrosians are depending on us. Earth is depending on us. We show the galaxy what humans can do. Nobody argued. Nobody complained. They all knew the odds when they volunteered. They checked their weapons, armed their explosives, and prepared for the final push. The attack began at dawn. 300 humans charged down the valley toward the hive node. The Devourers reacted immediately. Thousands of them poured from openings in the structure, a wave of biomechanical horror rushing to meet the human assault. The two forces collided with brutal intensity. Soman fired her rifle until the barrel melted. She switched to her pistol until that ran out of ammunition. Then she fixed her bayonet and fought hand to hand, stabbing and slashing, refusing to stop moving, refusing to fall. Beside her, Corporal Junho threw grenades into clusters of enemies and laughed like a madman. "Come on!" he shouted at the Devourers. "Is that all you have? I have seen scarier things in soul traffic." A massive Devourer, larger than any they had encountered before, crashed through the fighting and charged at their position. Hayun, the Marine who had joined Soman's squad days earlier, stepped forward with a rocket launcher. "Not today," she said calmly, and fired. The explosion sent chunks of biomechanical flesh flying in every direction, but there were too many. For every Devourer they killed, 2 more appeared. The human line was being pushed back, compressed, surrounded. Jiho could see it happening and knew they would never reach the hive node at this rate. "All units focus fire on the main entrance," he ordered. "We need to punch through. Everyone, give it everything you have." The humans concentrated their attack on a single point, a massive opening at the base of the hive node. Flamethrowers scorched the organic material. Explosives blasted through barriers. Marines with close combat weapons carved a path forward, trading their lives for meters of ground. Slowly, impossibly, they advanced. Bodies fell on both sides. The ground became slick with blood and fluid from destroyed Devourers, but the humans kept moving forward, step by step, closer to their target. Doyen fought near the front despite his injuries. His left arm was useless now, hanging limp at his side, but he carried a heavy weapon in his right hand and fired in controlled bursts, making every shot count. He thought about his ship, the steadfast Dawn waiting in orbit. He thought about the simple life he used to have, hauling cargo, avoiding trouble. That life seemed like it belonged to someone else now. A Devourer lunged at him from the side. Doyen spun and fired, but his weapon clicked empty. The creature's claws reached for his throat. Then Soman was there, her bayonet driving through the Devourer's core. The creature collapsed. "Stay close, Captain," Soman said. "We are almost through." They broke through the entrance after 40 minutes of brutal fighting. Inside the hive node, the environment was alien and wrong. The walls pulsed with what might have been veins. The floor shifted and moved under their feet. Everything was alive, aware, hostile. "Plant the charges here, here, and here," Jiho ordered, pointing at structural supports. "We have 30 minutes. Move fast." The Marines spread out, placing high-yield explosives at critical points throughout the lower level of the structure. The Devourers attacked constantly, but the humans held them back, forming a defensive perimeter around the demolition teams. Soman and Junho worked together, setting charges and linking them to a master detonator. Their hands moved automatically, muscle memory from countless training exercises. Around them, the sounds of battle were deafening. "Last charge is set," Junho reported over the comm. "We are good to go." "All teams report status," Jiho called. One by one, the demolition teams checked in. Charges were set throughout the structure. They had done it. Against all odds, they had done it. "Everyone pull back to the entrance," Jiho ordered. "We have 28 minutes until detonation. Move." The humans fought their way back toward the exit. But the Devourers had realized what was happening. They attacked with renewed fury, desperate to protect their hive node. The human casualties mounted rapidly. A massive section of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the main exit. Marines were trapped on both sides. Jiho made a quick assessment and realized the terrible truth. Half his force was cut off, separated from the exit, with no way to reach safety before the charges detonated. "This is Commander Jiho to all trapped units. You need to find another way out. There has to be a secondary exit. Find it and run. That is an order." "Sir, the structure is too damaged," someone reported. "The other exits have collapsed. We are trapped." Soman felt ice in her stomach. She was on the wrong side of the collapse. So was Junho. So were about 100 other Marines. They looked at each other, and Soman saw the same realization in everyone's eyes. Junho laughed, though there was no humor in it. Well, I guess I will not need to worry about that fishing trip with my brother after all. Junho, Soman started. It is okay, he said. We all knew this was possible. Someone had to make sure the job got done. Looks like it is us. He pulled out the extra-large explosive charge he had been carrying, the one he said he brought just in case. Everyone gather your remaining charges. We are going to make sure this thing dies even if the primary charges somehow fail. The trapped Marines collected every explosive. They had left and brought them to Junho. He began, linking them together into a massive bomb, enough to destroy a city block. His hands were steady as he worked. Sir, Junho said over the comm to Commander Jiho, we are setting up a secondary detonation point. If the primary charges do not work, ours will. Consider it insurance. There was a long silence. Then Jiho's voice came back thick with emotion. You are all heroes. Earth will remember you. The Calrosians will remember you. And the galaxy will remember what humans are capable of. Thank you, sir, Junho said. But we are not doing this for memory. We are doing it because 3 million people need us to. That is enough. On the other side of the collapsed ceiling, Doyen stood with the Marines who had made it through. He wanted to go back, to find another way to reach the trapped soldiers. But there was no time. The charges would detonate in 15 minutes. Fall back, Jiho ordered. Everyone out now! That is a direct order. They ran through the damaged hive node, fighting devourers at every turn. The structure was reacting to the charges, trying to isolate them, trying to neutralize the threat. The walls moved and shifted, trying to block their escape. A young Marine tripped and fell. Doyen grabbed him with his one good arm and hauled him to his feet. Keep moving, he shouted. They burst out of the hive node into daylight. Behind them, the structure pulsed with angry energy. The devourers were pouring from every opening, fleeing the doomed structure. Get to minimum safe distance, Jiho ordered. Run. The Marines ran across the valley floor. Behind them, inside the hive node, Junho and the trapped Marines held their position. They were surrounded now, fighting desperately to protect the charges they had set. 2 minutes to detonation, Somin said. She was bleeding from multiple wounds. They all were. But they kept fighting. A massive devourer crashed through the wall, heading straight for the secondary charges. Junho stepped in front of it, firing his rifle until it clicked empty. The creature's claw struck him, sending him flying across the chamber. Somin screamed and charged the creature. She drove her bayonet into what she hoped was a vital area. The devourer thrashed, its death throes destroying more of the chamber. It collapsed on top of the charges, its body covering them. Junho! Somin crawled to where he had fallen. He was broken, dying, but still conscious. Is the detonator okay? He asked, blood on his lips. Yes, it is secure. Good. Junho smiled. Tell them we completed the mission. Tell them, he coughed. Tell them I was not scared at the end. The war on Kalros III ended within 24 hours of the hive node's destruction. Without central coordination, the devourers turned on each other or simply stopped functioning. The surviving human forces worked with Calrosian military units to eliminate the remaining threats. It was dangerous, difficult work, but nothing compared to what had come before. Captain Doyen lay in a hospital bed on one of the human warships in orbit. The doctors had saved his life, but they could not save his legs. Devourer weapons had done too much damage. He would need prosthetics, months of rehabilitation, a new way of living. But he was alive. That was more than many could say. A Calrosian doctor named Raven visited him often. Raven had worked in the civilian bunkers during the battle, treating wounded from both species. She had 4 eyes like all Calrosians, and they always looked sad when she checked on Doyen. You should not have come, she said one day, changing the bandages on his injuries. Your council forbade it. Your people risked everything for strangers. Why? Doyen thought about the question. He had been asked variations of it many times now. Because you needed help, he said simply. And because if we do not help each other, what is the point of having a galaxy full of intelligent species? But the cost. So many of your people died. Yes, and every one of them volunteered. Every one of them knew the risks. They came anyway because it was right. Doyen looked out the window at Kalros III below. Your world is still here. 3 million people are alive who would have died. That is not nothing. That is everything. Raven was quiet for a long moment. Then she placed her hand gently on his shoulder, a gesture of deep respect in Calrosian culture. We will never forget, she said. Every child on this world will learn your names. Every family will know what humans did for us. Far across the galaxy on Varanus Prime, Ambassador He-Jin stood trial before the Galactic Council. The charges were serious: violation of quarantine orders, unauthorized military action, defying council authority. She could be imprisoned for decades. Humanity could be expelled from the council entirely, cut off from galactic trade and communication. But something had changed in the council chambers. Minseo, the communications specialist, had broadcast everything. The footage of human Marines fighting against impossible odds, videos of Doyen dragging wounded Calrosians to safety, the final moments of the trapped Marines holding their position so others could escape. The galaxy had watched it all. Now millions of people across dozens of worlds were sending messages to the council. The soft species, the ones who had never known real hardship, were having to confront what their leaders had done, or failed to do. The Trellix counselor stood to speak, its mandibles clicking nervously. Ambassador Hyojin, this council acknowledges that your forces achieved a military victory on Calros III. However, this does not excuse the fact that you violated direct orders. The rule of law must be maintained. I agree, Hyojin said calmly. The rule of law is important, but so is the rule of conscience. You ordered me to let 12 billion people die. I could not follow that order and still call myself a moral being. So I disobeyed, and if faced with the same choice again, I would disobey again. The chamber erupted in noise. Some counselors demanded her immediate imprisonment. Others argued for leniency. But then a new voice spoke, one that shocked everyone. Tyvan, the Calrosian engineer who had witnessed the battle from his bunker, stood before the council. He had traveled to Varanus Prime specifically for this moment. Behind him were hundreds of other Calrosians, all survivors of the attack. I speak for 3 million Calrosian citizens, Tyvan said, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. We were dying. We called for help. This council told us no. They established a quarantine and abandoned us to our fate. But humanity said yes. They came when no one else would. They bled for us. They died for us. He pulled up a holographic display showing names, thousands of names. These are the humans who died saving my world. Corporal Junho, who sacrificed himself to destroy the hive node. Private Salman, who fought for days without rest and died protecting the detonation charges. Commander Jiho, who led them all and survived but will carry the scars forever. Captain Doyen, who lost his legs dragging my people to safety. Tyvan looked around the chamber at the assembled counselors. You call them Deathworlders. You fear them. But I have seen what they truly are. They are protectors. They are heroes. They are what the rest of us should aspire to be. And if this council punishes them for saving lives, if you punish Ambassador He-Jin for doing what was right, then this council has no moral authority left. The chamber went silent. Then slowly other voices joined Tyvan. Representatives from a dozen species, all speaking in support of humanity. Not just the grateful Calrosians, but others who had been watching, who had been ashamed of their own government's inaction. The Lumini counselor swirled with conflicting colors. Finally it spoke. This council has made decisions today that we believed were logical, safe, and in the best interest of the majority. But we have learned something from watching humanity. Logic without compassion is not wisdom. Safety without courage is cowardice. We were wrong. The council voted that evening. The charges against He-Jin were dropped. More than that, the council issued something unprecedented. A formal apology to both humanity and the Calrosians. And they created a new designation, Guardian Status, giving humanity special authority to respond to emergency situations across the galaxy. It was a victory, but it felt hollow to He-Jin. She thought about all the people who had died to make this moment possible, about Somin and Junho and the others who would never see this result of their sacrifice. That night, she sent a message to Earth. The Council has recognized what we did on Calros III. They are calling it a turning point in galactic history. They are right, but not in the way they think. We did not just save one world. We showed the entire galaxy that being strong does not mean being cruel, and that being from a harsh world does not make you a monster. We showed them that humanity's greatest strength is not how hard we can fight, but what we choose to fight for. Remember our fallen, honor their sacrifice, and let us continue to be worthy of what they gave. On Calros III, a monument was being constructed in the center of Nethos, the city that had survived the invasion. It was a massive wall made of black stone, and on it were carved the names of every human who had died in the battle. 4,000 had come. 1,800 had survived. The monument honored the 2,200 who gave everything. The inscription at the top was written in both Calrosian and Korean. It read, "They were not our kind, but they were our kin. They came from a world of death and gave us life. May we be worthy of their sacrifice," Lieutenant Samin remembered as stood at the base of the monument. That was her full name now in Calrosian culture. Remembered as was added to the names of those who had died doing something so significant that their memory became part of the language. Soman remembered as. Junho remembered as. 147. Humans had earned that honor, but Soman was not dead. She had survived the hive node explosion through sheer luck. A collapsing wall had shielded her from the worst of the blast. She had been found 3 days later, broken and barely alive, but alive. The doctors said she would recover, though it would take time. Now she stood at the monument, placed her grandmother's dog tags at the base along with the dog tags of those who had not been so lucky, and wept. She wept for Junho and his jokes. She wept for Hyun and her quiet courage. She wept for Commander Jiho, who had survived but would never be the same. She wept for everyone who had given pieces of themselves to this cause. A Calrosian child approached, maybe 7 years old, with soft purple skin and wide, innocent eyes. The child placed a flower at the monument and looked up at Soman. "Thank you," the child said in careful Korean. "My family alive because of you." Soman knelt down, ignoring the pain in her healing body, and looked at the child. She saw in those 4 eyes all the life that had been saved, all the futures that would exist because humans had chosen to act. "We are humans," Soman said, smiling through her tears. "Helping people is what we do." Across the galaxy in dozens of different systems, a message was spreading. It came from what was being called the Deathworld Coalition, a new alliance of species that had evolved on harsh worlds. They were not as numerous as the soft species, not as politically powerful, not as wealthy, but they had something else. They had resilience. They had strength. They had the understanding that life was precious because it was difficult. The message was simple. We are here. We have been overlooked, dismissed, feared, but we are here, and we will protect those who cannot protect themselves, not for glory, not for profit, but because it is right. The galaxy is vast and often cruel, but it does not have to be. Wherever there is suffering, wherever there are people crying out for help, we will answer. We are the children of harsh worlds. We are Deathworlders, and we are just getting started. On Earth, in Geneva, General Minje read the report from Calros III. 2,200 casualties. A devastated planet slowly rebuilding. A galaxy forever changed. He felt the weight of every death, but also the pride of what they had accomplished. His aide entered the office. "Sir, we have a new situation.